American Gunfighter Podcast. Hosted by your instructors from Ghost Ring Tactical. With their combined experience in the military, law enforcement, firearms instructing industry, and security, they'll be discussing tactics, training, firearms, and equipment to help you become an even better American gunfighter.
Hey everybody, Nick here, and welcome to another episode of the American Gunfighter Show. With me tonight, we have Tim Proctor.
Welcome.
We have Chad Cotty.
Hello.
And we have Micah No.
Good evening.
All right. So tonight we are going to be talking about the pros and cons of having a red dot on your pistol. Your pistol, Chad. Did you hear me? Your pistol. We're also going to be covering some of the things that we recommend for you guys to do to make your dot experience better for you, how to shoot them better, and all sorts of other tips and tricks if you're looking to switch over to red, or if you're already running a red dot, things that are going to make you better.
Cheat codes.
Yes. So we're going to kick this off with our own personal experiences on why we all have converted over to shooting red dots. I'm going to go first.
Send it.
All right. So I was hesitant, to switch over to red dot. I'm a very, I was old school. I just, I'm like, I don't need this shit, this new trendy garbage. I'm like, no, I'm good. Okay. So I held out for a little while. I think I switched over, 4 years ago, something like that. Maybe
2019, 2020.
Yeah.
2020-ish.
Yeah. But for me, the big aha moment for me was I was taking a class, and the instructor had us do this drill where we were all dry, made sure we're all safe and clear. And we had to aim in at him at 25 yards. At that point, our eyes were focused on him, and he had a knife in his hand. Then he told us, as soon as I tell you to, I want you to switch your focus from me back to your front sight. Okay. And he gave us that cue. I switched my focus back to my front sight. The instructor ran across the range, and then he asked us, he goes, all right, so at that moment when you switch back to your front sight, would you have taken the shot because I had the knife and I was going to stab someone? Most of us said yes. I would have taken the shot because you were trying to use deadly force and hurt someone. But what we didn't see was him dropping the knife when our eye went from focusing on him, the threat, to our front sight with him being 25 yards out. That was my big aha moment where I'm like, wow, if I had a red dot optic, my biggest thing was that now I can be target focused. I can look at the threat because that is what our brains naturally want to do. We want to look at the thing that's trying to hurt us. And that red dot allowed me to do that. That was my big aha moment, big takeaway, which then I converted over all of my guns to now have red dots on them. All right. So that was my story. Tim, what was your aha moment, or when did you decide to switch?
So I started in law enforcement in 2002. Around 2005, I was shooting with my cousin, who was a nationally ranked high-level shooter. Wanted me to get better, basically, for my job. And sometime during that experience, I was shooting like single stack, 1911, 45, iron sights. And really, it was the competition that drove that for me. Somebody handed me an open gun and let me play with it. So an open gun, of course, ported. The optics is actually mounted to the frame, so it's not a slide ride. It doesn't move. But I had always been one of those people that had my focal transition was not really solid on the front sight, but it wasn't really out at my target. It was kind of somewhere in between. Yeah. So I got a little bit of both. I got a little bit of the front sight, could make sure they were lined up, etc. But I was also kind of target focused at the same point. When they handed me the open gun just to let me play with it and try it, I was like, oh, this is what I need, especially being right-handed, left eye dominant. Okay. It just made sense to me. And I'm like, this solves all my problems. So as I started to transition to that, as they become available, I started transitioning all my concealed carry and personal weapons over to the red dot.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Who wants to go next? Chad, let's go with you since he's still got the blue goodness going into his mouth.
I've got so many directions I could go with that right now. I'm just gonna leave it. I'm gonna let it go.
Me and Mike, we were feeling a little fruity tonight.
No judgments. No judgments.
Don't judge us.
Safe tree. Trust tree.
Trust tree. Yeah.
We're trying to get rid of these lovely alcoholic beverages that my family have left behind.
Students won't even drink them. This is what we have to deal with.
That's what we got to do. All right, Chad, tell us what was it for you that made you switch to red dot?
I mean, I never really had like that aha moment. Okay. It was just like a natural progression. You know, I start off with iron sights.
You want to follow the trends and you want to be like
absolutely. Hell yeah, it looked cool as shit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I want to be a cool guy.
Yeah, 100%. So I went out and bought one of the most expensive ones I could buy, and I put it on there, and I had no fucking idea what I was doing. But you know, I paid to go to classes and learn how to shoot. You know, with red dots and. You know, I think the pros were just obvious, so obvious that you couldn't say no, man. I mean, just the whole, you know, situational awareness, you know, target acquisitions and stuff like that. You know, I mean, it's hard once you know, kind of get into it and read into what the whys. You can't argue the facts that it's better. I mean, in most aspects. You know, so I was like, screw it. I'm going to buy one and see what it's all about. And that's what I did.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I was going to go into the always the caveat of people thinking that switching to a red dot is going to make them a better shooter.
That it does not.
Yes. Yeah. So just for all you listeners or viewers out there, don't get into that false idea that just because you switch from iron sights to red dot that it's going to make you a better shooter. All right. There are pros and cons. That's what we're going to be covering. But yes, you have to be a good shooter. A lot of times what we do with our students here is that they come out, you know, if they're shooting still iron sights at the end of class, a lot of times we address that. We're like, hey, you are shooting well enough with your iron sights. We think that you are ready to switch over to that red dot. So, Micah, talk to us about your big aha moment. Or your non-big aha moment.
I was going to say, I don't know that I had an aha moment of like, oh, now I need a red dot. I've been shooting red dots before red dots were cool. My very first red dot was a Delta Point before there was even a Delta Point Pro. I had an HK BP9 that I wanted to put a red dot on. Pistols.
Year-wise, you know,
Jesus.
Any idea? Just curious.
This is post-military, so maybe 20...
Post-military? Damn. Okay.
Maybe, 2014. I'm going to say at the earliest, we're probably talking 2015, 2016.
Okay.
And I already knew the advantages of a red dot on a rifle.
Yeah, of course.
Right. It became, we still had some guys kind of like you that were holding on the rifle side of things to the iron sights. But it was pretty apparent the benefits of a dot on a rifle. And then I started seeing these, you know, micro red dots, these tiny little red dots. Pistols didn't even have slides that were like the MOS with plates. Plates weren't even a thing. Maybe one or two guns somewhere had them. None of the guns that I owned had them. Okay. But the BP9 was my go-to gun. It's what I've been shooting for a while. And I decided I want a dot on it. And so I went to my local gunsmith. I was like, hey, I want this on this gun. And he just kind of shakes his head at me. He's like, I don't know what you want me to do. So I did some Googling, searching. And at that point, Leupold had a dovetail mount, right? So you can knock out the rear sight. Then it's got a little plate that slides into the dovetail where the rear sight was. It has two holes in it, and you put your dot on there and then screw the screws into the dot, and it pulls that plate up into that dovetail notch on the rear.
Okay.
But there is still like a lot of play and slop on the sides. And, you know, the top of the BP9 is kind of this tapered, almost like an older 1911, right? Where it's sort of rounded edges. And so you had to put this like plastic support plate underneath it, and that was moving around. And so he like JB welded the plate on there and like did some sanding work and got it on there. And that worked for, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. 3 weeks,
10 rounds.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not guaranteeing.
rounds you put
who knows? Not enough, right? And this kept coming loose and flopping around. I'm like, all right, what's another option? He's like, well, I can just cut your slide apart. I'm like, do it. So he milled my slide out, which is a thing people still do.
Yep.
And then I just mounted it directly. It just screwed right into the top of the slide itself.
That's what I did with my first one. Is I had to send it in and get it milled to mount it back on.
Yeah, where those removable plates.
There's no
and stuff
JB weld involved with mine, but yeah.
No, again, right? It's like, I'm trying to make this work, right? It was immediately apparent that it was awesome, even with the JB weld, like just how cool it was.
Yeah.
And then it was, the sights, the suppressor height sights. I mean, bro, these things were massive.
Yeah.
One, the delta point is already a really thick, tall. The body of a delta point is really thick compared to like the RMRs and things like that. And it just sat on that dovetail. I mean, my front sight was probably like,
wow,
massive. And the cool thing was
bigger than your standard suppressor. Really
huge. Yeah, it was a Trigicon. They were the only ones who made like their tallest sight. And he's like, we're ordering the biggest one.
Wow.
Okay. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good.
It's like a fin.
Yeah, basically, right? But the cool thing, one that drove me to the Delta Point, because we had to do the dovetail mount, you lost your rear sight. Well, the Delta Point has a little notch in the back where you can pull the plate out, and they make their own rear sight that you can tuck into that plate. So then now I can see through the glass on my dot and get my insanely tall Trigicon front sight lined up with the Leupold additional rear sight. So that's what took me to the Delta Point. Then I've been shooting Delta Points exclusively ever since.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, so we want to kind of share our stories of kind of what convinced us to switch over. But now let's talk about what our biggest pro is. Well, what is our biggest pro of the red dot? I basically covered mine when I was talking about my story. My biggest pro was being able to be target focused, being able to look at that threat instead of having to refocus back on that front sight. So, Tim, what about you? What's your biggest pro for these listeners, viewers out there?
I think it's probably a big pro for a lot of people, but just the situational awareness.
Yep.
And being able to keep both eyes open and be able to see what I'm actually shooting at with way more accuracy as I'm looking at the target and being target focused versus a very blurry target and not seeing, like you talked about at the 25 yard, not seeing that person drop that knife or not seeing the actions that were taken by that person.
Yeah. And like for me, I remember when I switched over to the red dot initially, it was very difficult for me not to close one eye. I kept trying to look, through the optic with that still the classic, only one eye open with the iron sights. It was a little bit of a process, but switching over and being able to keep both eyes open was, that's a huge one. Huge. Chad, what about you? What do you think is your biggest pro?
You're going to be disappointed, but I mean, I harp on and just keep going back to just a situational awareness. For what I do,
you can't.
I am. I'm sorry. I am. I can't help it, man. I mean, I don't.
Come on.
Like it really is. I mean, it's such a major part of what I do and what when we're in our situations that we have to have that situational awareness. Man. I would love to find something better, but I just keep going back to that. I really do. Okay. You're going into rooms and stuff like that. You can't afford to be front
You're talking
sight
about clearing
focused.
structures and stuff. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, you can't afford to be front sight focused. I mean, you have to be aware of everything around you because it's such a fluid situation and the dynamics are just crazy, and you need to need to see everything at once.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you have to, of stuff to process.
I know you want to hear something better, but man, that's just I keep going.
I just wanted something original out of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not very original,
so
bro.
You follow all the trends. You want to be cool. You're going to
follow all the trends.
You're going to take other people's answers.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm just reiterating. I'm reiterating what he says because he's right.
Okay. All right. Good. I'm just contemplating why do I have Chad here? I'm just going to repeat.
I could go. It's okay. I'm thirsty.
Mike, go.
It was a progression, right? So what I know now is not what I knew then.
Sure.
And I misused my red dots for a very, very, very long time.
Okay. Explain that. Yeah.
So it never, the target focus specifically, right? It never made sense to me if I'm shooting at something far away. So take my rifle, for example, right? My iron sights on my rifle. Why the shit am I going to focus a foot and a half? And why am I focusing on what's a foot and a half in front of my face if I'm trying to shoot something 300 yards away?
Yeah.
That's hidden behind my front sight post. Like, I didn't get it. It's then I wasn't a big shooter before I got in the military. I'd done some flat range stuff and gun rentals and things of that nature just because it was cool. But I had no understanding, no concept of any of that kind of stuff. And it just never made sense to me in the military during my training. I mean, I got my hits. I qualified, right? It's, all right, I must be doing something right. Mm-hmm. But it just never sat right with me. And then when we first got the red dots and started doing like the EOTechs and the aim points and stuff on our SOP mods and things like that, I was dot focused, right? I'm like, oh, this is just like a rifle scope. Like I'm just looking at the rifle scope and I really I want laser focus on that crosshair.
Oh, okay.
And so, right where it comes in, and then we're kind of going on a tangent here, but the way a rifle scope works with that parallax adjustment, I'm bringing all of those focal points together. So I was already doing something that I just didn't understand what I was doing and why it worked the way I was doing it. And I thought I could do the same thing with a red dot, but you can't. And so for me, it was, I know, that the situational awareness, my head's up, it's faster for me.
Okay.
And it's a more natural thing, right? It's not something I have to think about. Okay. And front sight, rear sight, target, front sight, rear sight, and squeeze, right? That's part of that process. I'm spending brain bites on that for a long time to where now it's just, I just put this thing in front of my face and it overlays an aiming device that tells me that I can do what I need to do. So yes, situational awareness and these other things, both eyes open, but it's the simplicity. It's one less, two less, three less things that my brain has to even spend milliseconds or hundreds of seconds or thousands of seconds just moving my eyes back and forth. You want a shit of a headache? Try and look at something up close and then focus far and away, and focus close and look far away, focus close and far away. Our eyes aren't designed that way, right? It's a muscle. I can only look at one plane at a time, one point at a time.
Exactly.
And so I think that is really, for me, the big advantage of the dot. My best advantage of the dot is that it facilitates more expedient processes to do what I need to do.
All right. So for all the viewers and listeners out there, what other pros? So that's all your favorite pros. What other pros can you guys think of if someone's thinking about a red dot or is maybe just getting into the red dot game on their pistol? What are all the other pros out there?
I mean, I hate to use these stupid phrases and terms from the shooting community, but 2 is 1 and 1 is none. That's an additional aiming device.
Okay.
Right. Just as easily as batteries can fail and dots can break and glass can shatter, so too can I dislodge the fiber optic tube in my front sight. So too can I knock my rear sight off my gun trying to rack it off of a...
My rear sight is currently like falling...
my
iron sight of my Glock's
all the way off,
over,
right? You're
so
actually one of the true ones where it's like, oh, my sights are off. Like, huh?
Yes.
No shit. His sights are way off.
Yes.
So again, right, a sighting system can fail, mechanical or otherwise. So it's another backup. It's one more thing that I have, another tool that I have to where I can use my gun.
Okay. What else you guys got for the pros?
For me, a quick acquisition. And I know, Mike, I kind of mentioned that just a second ago, but just being able to throw the dot up in between my vision and and that target, whatever I'm shooting at, it allows me to then tell me exactly where that bullet's going to go without having to switch that focus. So the focal shift thing for me was a huge advantage, because now I don't have to shift my focal. Back to your 25-yard thing, those focal shifts take time, and that's time if you're in a gunfight that you don't have and that you don't need to spend. So allowing me to just stay focused on one thing and put the dot in front of that focal plane, and I know, okay, that's where my bullet is going, as long as I do all the other fundamentals correctly.
Right.
That was a huge thing for me. So I like that, because it makes it a faster acquisition to get the sights where I want them on that target. Not just on the target, but where I want them, and I know where that round is going.
Okay. All right. So what else? Any other pros that you guys can think of?
If you ever get in a situation where you're single-handed, it's easier to rack rounds and stuff like that.
Single-handed, if you're doing reloads, immediate action,
clearing a malfunction, something like that. Yes. Yeah. If you're ever injured in a situation where you only use one hand, much easier
than trying to rack it off of your iron sights.
Iron sights, yes.
Okay. Yep. That's a very good pro. Yep. What else we got?
I think, and again, this is going to take some time to get used to and learn and whatnot, and based on the type of dot that you have. But it is versatile in the sense of the conditions that you might find yourself shooting. Low light conditions, if I don't have a light on my pistol, if I don't have a handheld light, in coming out of a dark theater into a brightly lit hallway, or coming from outside of a house in the broad daylight into a dark, a house with lights off, or a structure or a building that doesn't have any lights in there. So if I don't already have a flashlight, or if I just have the blacked out iron sights, it's difficult, right? We've all shot at night. We all know kind of the struggles that come along with that. And so I think it adds another layer of versatility to that weapon system.
Okay.
Where it could also be a detriment, but without getting too into the weeds.
We'll get into that when we start talking about cons and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it makes your gun a little more versatile, a little more adaptable to your environment and your shooting conditions.
All right.
Especially when most of your incidents happen at night.
Yeah. I mean, real gunfight, stuff like that. Exactly. Tim, any more pros you want to add to it?
I think there's a lot of things as we've increased the size on those. We had some
the windows and stuff.
Increase the size of the dot in itself, and specifically the window or the glass.
Okay.
That gives you a little more field of vision within that target. So the pros to that now become transitions from one target to the next target. Okay. You are able to see that. So you open up that field of vision. So when you're transitioning, you are usually, most people, once they have some experience shooting that dot, are faster with those transitions because of that dot, and also because of the window size. In a transition, if we're, say, 20 yards, it takes away, again, that focal transition. You got to find the target, transition back to your sights, find the next target, transition back to your sights, where with these now larger windows and just the red dot in general, you have a much faster transition time, because you never have to break that focus or that focal plane from those targets.
Okay. Yeah. Any other pros you guys want to throw out there before we start digging into the cons?
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah. So, all right. So moving on to cons of a red dot. So usually the biggest con that we hear from is when people switch over to red dot is when they draw their weapon, they bring it up, and they can't find their dot. I think that's one of the most common. That's one of the biggest ones I know I remember myself struggling with when I switched over to red dot. Was I would draw my gun out and I was like, well, where's this dot thing that's supposed to be in my glass? That took me quite a while to get adjusted to that. I made sure when I did switch over, I was doing like 25 to 50 draws, dry fire draws a day, just to try to figure it out. I'm like, I didn't really have much knowledge or information on what I was actually trying to do. I just know that I would draw my gun out. I would try to look through the glass, and I'm like, I can't see anything. Okay. And it took me quite a while to figure out the process of being able to bring that up to my face, because I think I was doing the classic looking for the dot in the glass instead of just bringing it up to my face, but staying focused on the target. And then what you normally see is with a student or with yourself, you draw that gun out, you bring it up, and you just see that wrist moving. You knowing exactly what's happening with that person is like they're not finding their dot, and they're looking for it. They're looking in that glass trying to find it.
Because we've all been there.
Oh yeah,
I was like, yep, been there. I know. I feel you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I thought I was down. I'm like, yeah, I got this. I was doing just tons of draws a day. And then I remember I was teaching a class, and I had to teach a single hand drill, and I hadn't fucking done any dry fire like that. Man. I drew out single handed, and I'm like, I'm back at square one again.
Yeah,
I'm back at square one. I can't find the dot again. But like I said, with practice and then learning what I should actually be looking for when I look through the glass, that was something else. So what is your guys's when it comes to that? What is your biggest tip on helping the shooter out if they can't find the dot?
So for me, I think the big thing is a little bit of understanding on the student's part, for one, right? How long have you been shooting iron sights for? How long have you held a gun, started shooting guns? How long have you been shooting guns for? 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. All right. How long have you shot a dot for? Oh, I just bought it 6 weeks ago.
Yep.
6 months
and we
ago.
see that a lot out here for class. It's like, hey, I just put this dot on right before I came out here.
Right.
Okay.
So you are 8 to 10 years behind the power curve once you put that dot on. So to think that you're going to do 50 dry fire draws and be like, John Wick, let's do this. So I think the common misconception is that just putting a dot on my pistol makes me a better shooter,
right?
Makes me more accurate, makes me faster, and I can shoot like an asshole because now I have a dot on.
And usually it makes you slower at first.
It should,
yes,
right? It should, because now I got to
slower.
start my process over again.
Yep. Yes. For me, I noticed I was slower acquiring targets initially, but I was more accurate at distance in the beginning with the dot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, again, that's that misunderstanding of what you're actually, how you use it and how it works and what you're doing. I think it's a big one. Big one.
I know I've heard you guys talk about, like, when you explain to students when they're looking through the glass, looking through the dot, what's one of your guys' tips to help them out?
So
to acquire the dot. Okay.
So for me, what I try to tell students in a very simplistic way is, somebody rings your doorbell, you go to the window, you look out the window, you see who's there. You don't look at the window before you look out the window, right? You simply look through the glass. So one of the ways I try to explain to people is, consider, although way smaller, look at that glass as your window, and simply continue to be focused on the target and try to put that window or that clear barrier between your vision and what you're looking at. Most of the time when you do that, you're going to find that red, it might not be right where you're looking, but you're going to see that dot printed on that glass and within your vision, and you can make those then fine adjustments to get that dot on the target where you want it.
Got it.
So looking at it as just like a window, I don't look at the window, I simply look through it. And so by figuring out how to put that glass right between your vision and that target will make you much faster at acquiring that target.
Good. That's what I was looking for. Very nice. Any other tips that you would give out to your students or anybody else listening out there to make it easier for them to find their dot?
Yeah, I mean, I learned this from Tim.
Okay.
So giving you kudos, bro.
Yeah, buddy.
So I always had a hard time getting that dot because I was always high. Right, my muzzle was always
raised. And then the dot was
yes. And he was like, man, he's like, most people when they don't find the dot, they're high. So just roll that pinky it'll drop that dot right down your your point of view. Your sight. I was like, huh. I did it.
And that tip right there really helped you. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Because I mean, I was like, I went through the struggles, man. I went through the struggles of shooting red dot, and I'm like, ugh, and I still do it sometimes. And it's like you're fishing, and Tim's like, hey, man. So just when you draw out, it's not there. Just roll that pinky down, and it drops your wrist, and it drops that dot right down in your field of view.
Okay.
So now, and that might not be for everybody, but for me, I was high.
Sure.
Yeah. So
okay. Any other tips?
So for me, a twofold kind of approach. One, right, when we say, I'm the cool thing about dot is I can be target focused. And usually when we start asking students like, okay, well, what are you looking at? What are you aiming at? Well, that brown piece of paper in front of me. It's a big fucking piece of paper, right? Pick a shirt button. See that one bullet hole. Is that one bullet hole right there? That's the highest bullet hole right in the middle of your target. I want you laser focused on that bullet hole. I want you to see the grease ring around that bullet hole, all the things. And then I just want you to draw your gun to that bullet hole. 9 times out of 10, that dot is just going to be there. It may need some refinement, right? It may need that little pinky squeeze or whatever the case may be. But typically it's because we don't have a refined target picture. I'm just shooting at this large piece of brown paper that's like, 29 by 48 or whatever. It's like, my gun is somewhere in there, but yeah, my gun can be doing this and I'm still pointed at that target as target focus, as opposed to I'm looking at the G on your hoodie and I'm just pushing my gun to that G.
Okay.
My other technique is with the support hand grip, right? So we always teach that nice thumb forward. I've been looking at and pointing at stuff my entire life, right? I don't have to look at Tim and be like, that's Tim, there's Chad, there's Nick, there's this. I've been associating my point and my eyeball acquisition my entire life. So if that's my grip, I'm just pointing at you now, and you've got pictures of me all over the place doing this kind of thing. Like everyone's lined up on the line because I'm just pointing my thumb at you. Well, now I'm holding a gun in my hand and I'm still pointing that exact same thumb at you. So I'm looking at what I want to aim at and I just point at it, but now there's a gun in my hand when I'm pointing at it. And it's just pointed where it needs to be pointed. So if we focus too much on the result, right, and not the process, we tend to get lost, I think. And students don't really understand what it means to be target focused. Yes, I'm shooting at a 6 foot tall human being.
But how deep? Yeah.
What am I looking at? What am I aiming at? I'm like, I was aiming at him. Okay, well, I'm aiming at you and I'm still aiming at you. All this is still aiming at you. But when I aim at that G, I'm aiming at the G on your hoodie. Right?
Yeah.
So I think just pick a more specific, finite point of aim and then press your gun out to that point of aim. And that tends like, and it might require a little bit of some of that natural point of aim kind of stuff, or some posture adjustment.
Right.
But that will eliminate a lot of the wrist movement and the canting and things like that.
Okay. All right. So moving on to our next con. Okay. Who else has another con?
When shooting a red dot like into the sun.
Okay.
That washout effect, man.
Okay.
It sucks.
Okay.
But it's just one of the things you have to understand what's going to happen if you're in that situation.
Okay.
The other day I was shooting, and man, we were shooting steel, and the sun was just right, and it was just blowing my glass up. I couldn't see anything.
Okay.
And
I haven't experienced that yet.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's a real thing, man.
I'm just lucky enough I haven't experienced.
Yeah. It's
that.
just like all you see is like red, just
Starburst.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Scintillation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just
Fucking
you're done. Like
Air Force
you're
words.
done. Yeah, you're done. You're like, yep, I'm out. And
Are you able to transition to your iron sights at that point?
well, the sun is so bright behind it that I couldn't.
So you can't even see your iron sights.
I can't
to
even see
it.
my iron sights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that completely takes both aiming elements out of play.
I might not have realized it that I might not have picked up on my iron sights at the time.
Okay.
Because it hit me and I was like, oh shit! Like this blew. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that's going to be a very limited instance, I'm sure.
Sure, but it can happen.
Yeah, but it
can happen.
Be aware that it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to have lint in your pocket and you put it in your gun and it blocks your firing pin.
Right,
we had it happen today. I've never seen that happen before. A guy was pocket loading, loads, his mag in the gun, and he gets one shot. Then I'm looking at him like, he's got white stuff like coming. I'm like, what is that? And we had to examine. I'm like, a piece of lint and paper blocking the firing pin from hitting the primer, all because he had it in his pocket. It was crazy. You never know what's gonna happen.
And it happens when you need it.
Yeah.
Like that night when I needed that dot, I didn't need it. We were in a competition together, but and he beat me, and I'm like, oh, like seriously, like it happens when you need it, Yeah.
Sometimes a piece of lint, and sometimes a $3,000 snowmobile accident. It's fine.
So, anybody want to expand upon that, or we're going to move on to the next?
Some cons?
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw one out there. With just technology in itself. Technology will fail. And we've all seen it out here many times when it comes to possible battery life, things coming loose, multiple. We had 1 or 2, 3 people this class that had red dot issues with either battery need to be exchanged. We had a few.
My
other things.
screws were loose.
Screws were loose. Oh, one of the other guys' screws came loose today as well. So it happens.
And while we're kind of on that topic of screws, what I see a lot is people will change screws, they'll change optics, they'll do some things, and then they'll go to the local hardware store and they'll buy some different screws that are like a harder, more brittle steel than what, say, the manufacturer recommends. And that might be the manufacturer of the red dot or the manufacturer of the firearm, because we all know a lot of these all come cut with RMR cuts or with
the new
red
ones,
dot cuts now. And so they'll go and they'll change these screws, and then they'll be snapping the screws, losing the screw heads from the recoil, from the impulse. And they're like, I don't know why I'm always snapping these screws. And it usually has nothing to do with the firearm or the dot. It has to do with they went to the local Ace Hardware. They bought a set of screws that fit, but they're the wrong metal and they're too brittle, and then they start snapping off.
Yeah, I can snap them off no matter what. I don't care.
That's a huge thing. It's just the screws. That's what I actually see more than the optic or electronic failure, is the mechanical failure of the screw mount itself.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, and to go along with that, kind of what you were saying, is that it's not just a shooting learning curve, it's just an ownership learning curve.
Yes.
Right? If I don't own a torque wrench, I don't know what a torque wrench is, I'm just going to tighten those screws until they're tight.
I feel like that was a direct
that's why I'm looking right at you in the face.
Directly attacking me with that
in
comment.
the face. What do you own now, Nick? Do you own a torque wrench now?
I own a Fix-It Sticks.
There we go. Nick owns a torque wrench.
No idea. I didn't believe it. I'm like, I'm good. I'm going to tighten it. Oh, it feels pretty tight.
A little bit more.
Let me go a little bit more.
And Hulk smash.
Yes.
And then
I'm with you, dude.
It happened, you guys. I snapped up, I think, 3 fucking screws before I was like, all right, I'm going to buy
something's not right here.
I'm going to buy a set of Fix-It Sticks. I'm like, this is sad. I'm like, this sucks. I wanted to mount my red dot so bad. And then I'm like, snap. I'm like, oh, shit.
That one's for you, B-roll.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, buddy.
But yeah, I think that ownership learning curve.
Yeah.
Torque specs, battery replacement. Some of them designs aren't great. I got to pull the whole dot off to replace my battery.
That
I got
is
one
a con right there.
One button that I can push.
Yeah.
I don't have the uppy downies. There's just a lot of other considerations that come along with it, as opposed to, let me go buy this gun, it's ready to go out of the box. Right now I've added this extra layer of points of failure. There's a lot of points of failure there.
Yeah. So give you guys some examples. I started off with the Trijicon RMR in my Glock 19. I've had 0 problems when it comes to battery life on that one. At this point here, it's been on constantly because none of us shut our red dots off. Okay, just for you guys to reference, we leave them all on all the time. My RMR has been on for a total of 4 years, I believe, so far, without a battery being changed. It's crazy. But my Holosun 507K that I have on my carry gun, that son of a bitch, that battery has to be replaced like monthly. it's crazy. I mean, I talked to Holosun at SHOT Show. They told me to send it in because that shouldn't do that. So hopefully, if you guys have one, it doesn't have that same battery life. But that has been a horrible thing for me with my carry gun, is that I've constantly have to check that thing to make sure. I mean, I had to replace right before this class because it worked the day before. And then I grabbed my gun for class. Luckily, before I leave the house, every time, I check my dot to make sure that it's working. But at any point during the day, it could go out of me out in town. I don't know. Okay, that's one con that I've found with the Holosun, that I haven't had that problem with the Trijicon, with the RMR. That battery life has been incredible.
So I think too, and this is sort of an extended con, and we've seen this across all weapons platforms in a lot of our classes, is that a lack of confidence in my equipment is probably one of the most corrosive things for a new shooter, a learning shooter, a well-practiced shooter. Right. If I can't trust my gear, there's always that nagging doubt. Is this the time when I pull that gun out and the battery's not working? Is this the time that my screws come loose? Most of us don't have that issue with just an iron sight gun, just shooting normal irons, unless it's some crazy mechanical failure or thing like that. I've seen this happen with a lot of students and a lot of people that I shoot with on a regular basis. Okay. Is they just tend to start losing confidence in their gear. And now it becomes my dot's broken. My dot's off. Whatever the case may be. And it can be pretty corrosive. Okay. Yeah. You got something, Chad? No. You look like you had something. You look like doing the Matthew McConaughey booger roll.
Yeah. Is that what that is?
Yeah, from those Lincoln commercials.
No, this is a thumb roll. This is a booger roll.
I thought he was he just had something good. Like he's oh man, I got
I was deep in thought there for a second. But it just didn't pan out. Yeah.
I do think, kind of talking about what Micah was saying, is sometimes it also goes back to the user, and that is they'll go out and spend $700,000-$800,000 on a nice weapon, and then they want to buy the cheapest dot they can find, which then causes that confidence issue because they're not confident in their equipment. Because at the end of the day, if this is something you're going to use to save your life, what is your life worth? Yeah. And so you see those. Some, not all, but we've had it happen in class where multiple students have come out spending $1,000 buying a nice, SIG 320 or a nice Glock or a CZ or something, and then we see this. And I'm not saying all are cheap, because Holosun overall, compared to a lot of others, are in the lower price end.
Yes, affordable.
But we'll see some people bring some very, very cheap dots that are not known for quality, and then they don't trust their equipment. And it's like, okay, just go out and buy. I'm not saying buy the most expensive one like Chad, right?
No, I'm sure it wasn't the most expensive, but it was up there. I mean,
and it doesn't have to be that, but buy something of quality that you do trust.
Yeah.
But I found, like, man, and I'm sure everybody else here has felt the same way. I've tried to go cheap sometimes, and it always bites me in the ass.
I try to go cheap all the time.
Yeah, I know you do.
I never go cheap.
Micah never.
I know you don't.
Micah never does. Yeah, no.
I'm like, I call Mike. I'm like, hey man, like this is what I got to buy. I don't know. And he's like, dude, just do it.
What kind of discount can you get me?
Like,
can you get me that at wholesale?
Buy it, yeah. My wife's pissed. I'm like, oh, he's like, oh, screw it, man, let's do it.
I'll wait for the Black Friday deal. So
I'm like, well, I kind of need it now, but yeah, I justify the shit out of it though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What other cons can we think of for our listeners here?
I think one of them, and it's become less of an issue as time goes by, is compatibility issues, right? I mean, like my situation where I had a gun that wasn't designed for a dot.
Right. Your JB Weld story?
Yeah, my JB Welds. Yeah. Back then that was a more common problem. Nowadays, most big gun manufacturers have some version of a gun that has a slide that's already cut for a particular type of dot.
Yeah.
Right. So dots come in different footprints, which basically means the size of the dot and where the screw holes are on the dot. Some of them share some of those features and some of them don't, right? There's like 2 or 3 main groups of dots. So I may really, really want a, Glock 43X. I don't want those.
I can't believe that came out of your mouth.
Yeah.
God, did that hurt you?
The word
Did that
lock
hurt to say that?
That hurt me.
Yeah.
Lock perfection.
Did you vomit a little bit?
But
I
right,
fire a Glock 43 X.
he does, which is why I'm saying it.
That's why I'm saying
But
it.
a good example, like I've got a P365 X macro. I'm not going to be able to put a Leupold Delta point on that X macro, even though I shoot Delta points exclusively. I've got to suffer through now figuring out what dot I can get on that little itty bitty teeny tiny micro gun, or the other way around, right? So I think some compatibility issues where it's like, well, I really, really like the RMR because it's got the buttons and this and that, but that system doesn't support that. No, it's getting better, but I think it's still something that's out there.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
I went. The first dot I bought was an RMR, and then I went to the Hollison. Then now I'm at a Delta Point.
Okay.
High win.
And the RMR, I really had a hard time with the glass and that the parallax. It didn't work with my eye for some. I could not pick that dot up. But I look back in hindsight, it's like, well, was it the dot or was it the shooter?
Okay.
I'm like, maybe I just wasn't to the point where I could really work that dot like it should have been worked. So it's just kind of it's something to think about.
Yeah.
The Hollison, like I've had it for a while and I haven't changed the battery a whole lot. The 507K.
That's what I said. Maybe
I haven't had a whole lot of issue with
it.
Yeah. One issue I have had with a Delta Point is I'd been told that the older ones. I was at a training competition a while back, and I just got this red dot, just got the gun. I go out there and I draw to make sure I'm chambered, and I could not see the dot. It was turning off. Well, the instructor helped me. He was like, "Hey man," he was like, "I've shot Delta Points forever." He said they sometimes have an issue with the battery connection. You told me that story the other night about they don't connect sometimes. You have to put like a piece of paper in there every once in a while, and
that's shitty. Yeah.
I'm sitting in a comp at a SWAT competition.
Yeah.
But all these cops, and I'm like,
and you look like shit.
I look like a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh god.
That
He was like, don't worry.
sucks.
He was like, dude, don't worry. It happens, man. It's happened to me. And I'm like, okay. And he's a pretty reputable person. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel so bad now, but still, I felt about that big.
Yeah, so the Delta Point has a spring-loaded door, which is where the battery goes. So it's always wanting to open itself up. So it's a spring-loaded door, and then you push a latch over that little door to hold it down. So sometimes that latch can get worn, the spring can be a little tight and pop that door up. They also have got a pretty bad battery terminal. There's a little nub that makes contact on the bottom, and because we're on a slide and that slide is reciprocating, it's moving that battery back and forth ever so slightly. I had a deal in a competition where batteries are cheap, so I just swap them out now based on this one event where that battery terminal had actually worn a flat spot in the battery itself. So now it had just enough play to where that battery was moving around. The dot would come on and would flicker and it would go off, and it would come on and then go off. And then next time I drew it, it would go off. I'm like, what the fuck? And when I'm like, well, obviously my battery's bad or something.
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. So I pop it out, pull it out, and there's like a little teeny soft nub that's worn off on that battery plate. I was like, oh shit.
Curious, do you know how long the battery was in there for? Like how
long?
Okay,
thousands and thousands
so
and thousands of rounds.
quite a while to kind of rub that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in his case, it could have been that spring over that gate.
Okay.
Yeah, I just got the gun. I just got my pistol, and I obviously changed the dot out, and all that stuff. But or changed the battery out, and it sucks, man. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I feel like an asshole.
Wow.
It was bad.
Yeah, nothing's perfect. There's no singular solution when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But one thing that stands out to me though, we have a lot of cons, probably more than the pros, but the pros outweigh the cons.
Yeah. So
They really do.
So even though we're covering cons, stuff like that, just so you guys know, it's like, we're going to tell you guys all the bad stuff too.
Yeah.
But like what Chad said, no matter what, if the cons outweighed the pros,
But the pros outweigh the cons.
if the cons outweighed the pros, we wouldn't have red dots on our guns right now.
Correct.
That's where I was going with
Yeah,
this.
I'm sorry. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think too the cons are, while there are many, they are minimal.
Yes.
Exactly.
Battery life, great. Batteries are
Just
cheap. I can
change
order
batteries,
7,000 batteries on Temu for like $1.85.
I think also you have to consider the fact that in all the cons we've talked about multiple different optics. So we're talking about multiple
Right,
different
specific
brands.
features on each one optic.
There's not one brand that we've mentioned where it's like this is bad,
universal
this
con.
is bad, and listed eight things that are bad about that specific optic.
Yeah.
So we're talking in generalities of multiple optics that we've all tried.
100%. That's a good
Across the
point.
whole
Yes,
industry.
very good.
Correct.
Yeah.
So before we get going, I did have it just occurred to my brain hole, a really good pro, which actually is something that Tim taught me.
Okay.
Was my pro, is that, and it takes a little bit of time to learn, but your dot will actually tell you a lot more information than just I'm shooting, right? Than just my dot is where it needs to be and I squeeze my trigger. So when we think about our grip pressures and what my gun is doing and under recoil and all these other things, that dot starts to move in certain ways. And once we pick that up and once we kind of understand what it looks like when my grip starts to fall apart, where my dot is recoiling this way, and then now all of a sudden it's recoiling this way.
Yeah.
And it's making this horizontal diagonal line. I know I need to increase my grip pressure throughout this string, right? If I'm shooting a string of 4 or 5 targets with 2 rounds, bang, 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 that dot starts to do this, and then it does this because my grip is falling apart.
Yeah.
So once we can start to sort of interpret the language of what my dot is trying to tell me, that was a big step for me in my dot progression. Like I said, I shot a dot for a long time poorly as an aim, like looking down the dot. I used to be that guy. There are times when that happens. But once that was a big aha moment for me, was that listen to your dot. Your dot is telling you something. Your dot is telling you things.
Yeah.
And that was a really big one for me.
Yeah, no, really good.
So just to add on to what Micah said, one of the things we didn't really cover, and it's kind of relatively new, and people talk about it if they know what it is, or they ask about it and they wonder if it works, is what we call dot occlusion. And that is, some people make covers for the dots. Some people just use like some black tape, and that's not really specifically about the dot. But as you're learning to shoot a red dot, it will make sure that you are staying target focused and you're not looking for the dot. So
Keeping both
So
legs
explain-
open.
for those
explain
people that don't know what occlusion is taking black tape and actually, or making a cover. There are companies that make occlusion covers, and it covers the front of the dot so that all you see if you look through the dot in itself is black. You
But
see
you have
the
to have
red
both eyes
dot
open, right?
onto something black. If you are looking for the dot, it's going to be very blurry out into the range. If you're staying target focused, our brains will overlap those two images and the dot will appear on the target, even though my non-dominant eye is what's actually picking up the target. And so it is a good way to make sure as you're learning the dot that you are staying target focused and not dot
looking for it.
focused.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, very good. Good, Chad.
Going back to what Mike was talking about, using the dot as a diagnostic tool, we can use that for footwork as well. You know, when we're shooting and moving and stuff like that, that dot's going to tell you how your body's moving. Because if you get that figure 8, then you're walking at a very wide stance because your hips are moving like this.
Yeah.
And everything else is moving like this. So you see that, like, hey, my dot's doing this. All right, I need to narrow my stance and walk a little more heel to toe. Okay. And instead of your dot doing that figure 8, your dot starts to just do this. So you're shooting at a different plane with that dot up and down, as opposed to trying to shoot on the walk, on the move with that figure 8.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any other cons that you guys want to bring up before we start moving on to something else? Anything else? Okay.
There's some big ones. I think we got most of them.
Yeah. So let's ask the type of dot you like to shoot. So most common out there, you got a single dot, or you have the circle dot, similar to like more of an EOTech style reticle. So for you guys, I know for myself, I started off with the RMR, which just had the single dot on it. I was fine with that. I eventually shot a student's Hollow Sun that had the more of the circle dot. I liked it. I gave it a try. That's why I switched, put the Hollow Sun on my carry gun. I still have the Trijicon RMR on my 19. But what for me made me want to try that circle dot was the outer ring being a reference point for me. So as I drew the weapon out, if I somehow didn't get my dot exactly where I wanted to, I could at least see the outer ring maybe pushed off to the left, maybe pushed off to the right, but allowed me a reference to be able to make that quick adjustment to be able to get my dot where I wanted it to be. Now, I know the cons on that one is, it takes up a lot of space inside that glass, where maybe I can't see the thread as well because I've got so much going on in that glass. But I don't know. It's like I'm kind of torn. When I go back to my 19, I have no problem switching back to just a regular dot. But, it's like I really like trying out that circle dot, as that reference. Yeah. So what about you guys? What do you guys prefer?
I went down the same road you did.
Okay.
In that growing phase of shooting dots, like I was same mentality. Like I'm like, yeah, if if I'm off, I hope I'm close enough to see the rest of that.
It's pretty hard to be that far
off.
It
really is. You're like, okay, now I can correct.
Yep.
But as I started shooting more and better and stuff like that, at distance, it was just really hard.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Yep.
Yeah. You're trying to make that shot at 25 or 30 yards. And then you have that 30 MOA. It's what you just can't see it.
Yep.
So it just blocked everything out.
Okay.
Too much going on. Too busy.
Okay. So right now you're back.
I'm
to
back to a single dot. Yeah, because I have the Hollow Sun that has the single dot and then the circle.
Yeah, because a lot of dots now that are coming out, you have a choice. You can program them to either be single dot or the circle dot. So I'm excited to hopefully get a hands on. Not like this guy over here, but being able to get a hands on the Trijicon RMR HD, which has those options, the bigger glass, all that kind of stuff.
In your guys' Hollow Suns, how big is that dot?
32 MOA?
No, not the circle, the dot.
3.25?
3.25.
3.25, I think.
On a Hollow Sun, if you're looking at like say a 507 or something, the small dot is almost always 2 MOA.
Is it?
And then
Is it
the
really?
circle dot the circle in itself is 32.
Oh, it's 32.
And most of the time you have the option of the dot, the circle dot, or just the circle itself with no dot in the center.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I could be wrong.
I run Hollow Suns almost exclusively. That's what I like. In my open guns, I run the one that's actually built for a rifle, which is a 510.
Okay.
I've been converting all of my things. I was running like a 507. Now I've gone to the 507 comp, which is just a bigger square window. So it gives me a little more field of view. I run a 2 MOA dot with nothing. And I do that because what I found myself doing was in the playing of the game of USPSA and the competition games, as I would transition the gun, you're trying to shoot quickly to gain as many points as you can in the least amount of time in general. In the 510, it's not a 32, it's actually 64. So it's twice that size that you see on the screen. And what I found myself doing is I would transition the gun to the next target, instead of waiting for the dot to be where I was looking, I was breaking the shot as the edge of the circle touched the spot which I was looking, which was causing me to shoot left or right depending on which way I was transitioning the gun, which caused me to, at distance 12, 8, 15, 18 yards, might be scoring less points.
Got it.
If you're shooting USPSA, you have 3 scoring zones, an Alpha Bravo or an Alpha Charlie and Delta, and they score different points. Okay. And then you have hardcover, so I might actually break that shot into the hardcover, which would count it as a miss. So I turn the circle off now, and I run exclusively just the dot, and I really like a smaller dot, like 6 MOA. That's huge for me.
No, I agree.
I like a 2, maybe a 3 MOA dot at most.
Yeah, that's that at most.
Yeah, because my RMR was a 6, and I got
That's
it.
huge.
And I'm just like, holy shit! Like it's too much. It is. It just covers.
I've looked through and seen those size dots, but I never owned one. I saw. I'm like, that is way too big. I want something small.
You know, when I bought that dot, I didn't know shit. You know, like I didn't know you guys for sure. You know, and so I was just buying shit. You know, and you know, like everybody else, it kind of bites you in the butt sometimes. But that's a learning curve.
Yeah. So for me, again, there's no singular answer. Okay. On my pistols, I've shot exclusively Delta Points, Delta Point Pros.
That's a single dot.
A single dot. I think it's 2.5 MOA dot.
Okay.
I have a 6 MOA dot as a offset red dot on my rifle because that's zeroed, you know, from 10 feet and in.
Okay.
So as soon as I got color on you, I'm pulling the trigger because it's going where I need it to go. Right. I'm not trying to make that precision shot. That's what my LPBO is for, or my magnifier. I can just camp my rifle right up close, bing, bang, bang.
Okay.
Done. Pistols, 2.5. I am starting to reconsider and look at the Trijicon SRO. So it's another version, but the same reason that all you guys are talking about with the circle.
Okay.
Where the human eye can rectify a circle very quickly, right? I can tell if that circle's not quite off, and I can correct very, very quickly, as opposed to the square or the ellipse of the RMR or my Delta Point. So the SRO is just a dot, but the window itself is a circle. So I don't need the circle inside projected onto the image or anything like that.
Big circle.
I just have the dot itself is circle, right? So as I draw that out, I can correct easily just the frame of the optic.
Got it.
Right? Without looking into that window and trying to find that dot. And then I'm doing this kind of thing, looking to rectify my circle.
Okay.
It's much like the same problem where we draw our gun and it's like, I can start to see my front sight and now I can start to rectify and then right out of my peripheries and I'm kind of in my field of view and then I can line my sights up. It's the same deal with that circle in the SROs. As I pull it out, I can just tell where that circle goes and I'm just waiting for that circle to come into place and then boom, my dot's right there. Okay. So I'm starting to lean more towards that. I've been shooting those for a little while on a couple of different guns. And I kind of like them. I am, though, very interested in the RMR HD. Yeah. From SHOT Show. It was a pretty impressive optic.
So the Delta Point's not exclusive then?
It is currently the only optic that is on my guns. Yeah. Right? I've borrowed other guns and shot other guns with other optics, but for me, it is currently the exclusive optic.
He's currently flirting with the idea of Trijicon.
So, and I know I'm messing with Michael, but we did talk about that a little bit today. And in the transition going from the Holosun 507 to the Holosun 507 comp. Okay. The comp is a square window, very square window, bigger window, but very square. And although the 507 is not a circular glass like the SRO, it is a very circular top. And I find myself, as I'm transitioning and having to work through that, just a little off from time to time with that square. And I'm starting to realize what Micah was saying, that just having that oval circle type shape does give the human eye a better reference point than a square to align that to the target. So we were actually discussing that and trying some things out on the range this afternoon involving those type of things. And I know there's some science behind it, but there's some legitimate
use to that. You read the science, didn't trust the science, but now you're realizing you're seeing it.
No, Micah Googled it.
I'm just saying you're now personally.
So I don't know if I trust Micah.
Okay, you don't. Got it. All right.
Some lessons are harder to learn than others.
I've seen his Google search. You know.
So are there any other tips, tricks, cheat codes that you want to share with the listeners out there, viewers, that's going to help them out, going to make them better?
I think having the proper mindset and the right expectations.
Okay.
Again, we kind of talked about that, right? The overconfidence of I'm gonna slap a dot on here and I'm freaking off.
Amazing shooter.
Grandmaster USPSA shooter. As soon as I put this dot on this gun.
Yeah.
It's gonna take time. It's like anything else. It's another tool, and there's a learning curve that's in there. Be patient.
Yeah. Don't get frustrated.
Don't get frustrated. Right. And that's like anything, right? Like, I've talked shit for so long about Nick's hook grip. Guess who's shooting a modified version of Nick's hook grip, but still, right? The hook method. Yes, I will admit I'm changing things. So again, it's okay, right? Change is tough. Nobody likes change.
Yep.
And it takes time. Give it the time that it takes.
Yes.
You will see.
I like that.
You will see the returns. I guarantee you.
Give it its time.
Yes.
Put in the time. Train with it.
Yeah. My other comment on that is do not half-ass it. Stay away from the dovetail mounts. Like, I don't want to get a new gun. I don't want to cut my slide. I don't want to do this thing. If you're going to do it, just do it. Either you get a gun that's prepped for a dot, you get a gun that comes with a dot, you buy a new slide that's cut for a dot. Don't kind of like try and put a dot on a gun that's not set up for a dot. You just go get a different gun. Right. I've got a student of ours, Derek, one of the Blue Falcon brothers. He's really ate up about a 1911, like an OG 1911 with a dot. I'm like, those guns are almost 200 years old.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a freaking red dot when that came around. There are very few manufacturers, like Dan Wesson is one, maybe Nighthawk Customs. You're looking at $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 guns in that particular style that will accept a red dot because they're not designed that way. So if this is something that you want and you're seriously considering and you don't have the gun that's set up for it, it is worthwhile to go just get the gun, either get a new version of the same gun, go get a different gun, go get a slide at least, or send your gun out to get milled properly, right? Don't go the JB Weld route. It doesn't work. Don't half-ass it. You can both feet, dive in.
So we're giving you guys another excuse to go out and buy another gun because I know you.
I will always give you that reason.
Everybody out there needs another excuse to buy another gun.
I can justify anything to myself. I'm just trying to help you guys out.
I'll give you the next excuse.
Okay.
One of the things you definitely want to do is vet your instructors. But if you're going from iron sights, and like Micah said earlier, maybe you've been shooting iron sights like yourself, Nick, 15, 20 years of iron sights, go vet your instructor and get quality training in that red dot. There is nothing like somebody being able to stand there and show you or critique you in the things that you are doing wrong to get you and just make that process go from
that learning curve be a lot
of a learning curve down to a 3-month learning curve where now you're comfortable with that. What I will say are there are a lot of people out there, vet your instructors, don't just go to the closest one just because they say they teach a red dot
basically
class.
Tim is putting a plug in to tell you to come train with us.
There are a lot of good instructors that I have trained with myself. I'm not saying it just has to be us. Go out and vet your instructors, but go out and get some training with that red dot. There are
a lot of places are offering classes just
offer those type of classes in the red dot transition from iron sights to red dot. It will greatly decrease that time.
So I think we'll wrap it up with that. Hopefully this information is helpful and useful to you guys. If you got any questions about any of this kind of stuff, you guys can go ahead and just comment below, reach out to us, let us know. If you liked what you're hearing here, please like and subscribe. Until the next show, boys. We'll see you then.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the American Gunfighter Podcast. Be sure to listen next week. And please don't forget to leave us a review. Also, if there's a topic you'd like us to look into, please be sure to leave a comment.